Inside ADX Florence Pelican Bay, America's worst maximum security prisons exposed. The vanishing blueprint. Think you've seen darkness? Subscribe now, because what you're about to hear is not a movie. It's real, it's happening, and it's more disturbing than you can imagine. The pre-dawn air in southern Colorado cut like glass. A convoy of black SUVs crept along a private road toward a hulking concrete complex ringed by coils of razor wire. To outsiders, ADX Florence was a name in news stories, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, a place for terrorists and gang leaders. To the agents inside the lead vehicle, it was a potential crime scene in its own right. In the back seat, federal investigator Claire Monroe flipped through a manila folder filled with sealed affidavits, smuggled blueprints, and whistleblower statements. She had spent months connecting dots between two facilities thousands of miles apart, ADX Florence in Colorado and Pelican Bay State Prison in Northern California. Both had been built to crush gang hierarchies and isolate the worst of the worst. Both had also spawned lawsuits, hunger strikes, and human rights reports. But Claire's new evidence hinted at something even darker, a coordinated network moving contraband, orders, and money through the very infrastructure designed to prevent it. Her driver, a marshal assigned at the last minute, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You're telling me this all started with a piece of mail?" She nodded. Legal mail scanned at Pelican Bay, a diagram that shouldn't exist. Same codes I found in an old ADX maintenance plan. The marshal whistled low. "So this isn't just about an inmate?" "No," Claire said, looking up at the looming towers. "It's about the system itself." Inside ADX, the night shift was ending. Guards in black tactical gear moved quietly through H Unit, the special security unit where communicated. Ions were monitored to the second. In cell 205, an inmate named Rafael "Rafa" Salinas, a former cartel logistics chief who'd been at Pelican Bay before his transfer, pressed a stubby pencil to a piece of graph paper. The paper came from a law library request. The drawing he sketched resembled an innocuous drainage layout, but coded into the lines was a set of bank routing numbers and a message. Phase 2. Salinas had been in solitary for 8 years. Officially, he had no phone, no internet, no visitors. Yet somehow, just weeks after his transfer from Pelican Bay, cartel shipments had shifted routes across 3 states. Investigators suspected he was still giving orders, but they couldn't prove how. Claire's file suggested an answer: hidden pathways built into the prison's own systems, exploited by corrupt contractors and staff. At the same time, 1,300 miles away on California's rugged north coast, Pelican Bay's security housing unit sat in its own pre-dawn silence. Rows of windowless cells, thick steel doors, and narrow corridors held hundreds of men classified as gang members. Lawsuits had forced some reforms, step-down programs, more yard time, but indefinite isolation remained a scar on the institution. A young correctional officer doing rounds paused at a door where an inmate had taped an unusual pattern to his slot. It looked like a child's puzzle, but was actually a cipher, a mirror of the code Salinas was writing at ADX. Back in Colorado, Claire followed the marshal through multiple checkpoints until they reached the control room. Monitors flickered with dozens of camera feeds, empty hallways, concrete pens open to a sliver of sky, and solitary cells where infamous names sat unseen. A technician handed her a printout. "This was pulled from last night's mail scan," he said. The paper bore a near-perfect match to the Pelican Bay diagram, but with ADX, corridors overlaid in red. Someone was mapping both prisons at once. Claire's heart pounded. "Who authorized this?" she asked. The technician shook his head. "No one. It came in with outgoing legal mail from H Unit." She turned to the warden. "If this is real, your most secure wing has a leak." He folded his arms. "Or someone wants you to think it does." As the morning shift began, the marshal's radio crackled. "Control to all units, unexplained power dip in sub-level C." The technician frowned at his screens. "That's not possible. Those lines are hardened." Claire grabbed her badge. "Show me where." They descended into the bowels of ADX, past layers of locked gates until the concrete narrowed to a maintenance corridor. The smell of metal and bleach hung heavy. At the far end, a section of wall bore faint scratch marks. Claire crouched, running her fingers over the seams. "This isn't standard," she murmured. The marshal swept his flashlight and found a tiny drill hole above a fiber optic line. Fresh dust lay on the floor. Above them, in cell 205, Salinas folded his graph paper into a tight square and slid it under his mattress. He sat back on his concrete bed, eyes closed, lips moving silently. The camera in the corner zoomed in. He was mouthing something. "Every fortress has a fault line." Claire's phone buzzed with an encrypted text from a source inside Pelican Bay. It contained only 2 words: Foundation access. She looked at the drill hole, then at the marshal. "We're already too late," she whispered. In Sacramento, prison administrators woke to an early morning news alert, a leaked memo claiming that high-risk inmates had been coordinating across state lines despite Supermax restrictions. Officials scrambled to deny it, but reporters were already calling. Meanwhile, at ADX, a quiet alarm went off on a sensor no one had checked in years. Claire straightened up, dust on her hands. "I need to see inmate Salinas. Now." The marshal hesitated. "He's on no contact status." "Then override it," she said. "If we don't stop this, your worst maximum security prisons won't just be a scandal. They'll be a crime scene." They reached H Unit just as officers were opening Salinas's door for a routine medical check. Inside, the concrete floor gleamed, too clean. The mattress lay perfectly flat, no sign of the hidden paper. On the desk sat a single envelope stamped legal mail. The officer picked it up and frowned. It was addressed to Claire Monroe. She tore it open. Inside was a Polaroid photograph of the very corridor she had just inspected, taken from an angle impossible without access. On the back, in neat block letters, was a single sentence: "When you open the next door, everything changes." She looked up at the cell camera. Salinas stared back through the glass, a faint smile on his face. Somewhere deep in the prison, a relay clicked once, then twice, as if awakening. Sirens pierced the morning stillness inside ADX as the control room went to incident mode. Doors slammed, gates sealed, and the dull red of emergency lights washed over the gray corridors. Claire Monroe clutched the Polaroid in her hand. Its edges were damp with sweat. She had handled dozens of classified memos about Supermax operations, but never had one of her leads stepped so far ahead of her. Down the hall, Rafa Salinas sat in the interview booth, shackled but calm. He was a composite of everything Claire had been investigating: the long-term Pelican Bay SHU inmate turned ADX transfer, the coded drawings, the unexplained mail. In reality, prisoners like him had coordinated gang operations from isolation before. Operation Black Widow had proved it, but no one had ever documented how it happened. She took a seat opposite him. "Your codes match infrastructure in both prisons," she said quietly. "If you're trying to show me something, now's the time." Salinas's eyes flicked to the ceiling camera. "You already knows." "Ow," he murmured. Indefinite isolation breeds ingenuity. You build walls, we build maps. Claire thought of Pelican Bay's hunger strikes in 2011 and 2013, how inmates used the few channels they had, mail, legal visits, yard time, to coordinate a protest that forced legislative hearings. Those strikes had been monitored, infiltrated, and yet still spread across the state. She looked back at Salinas. "This isn't a hunger strike," she said. "This is something else." In the control room, Lieutenant Harris was trying to reconcile data from 2 places at once: a sensor trip in ADX's sub-basement and an identical alert from Pelican Bay's mailroom about an outgoing package with matching codes. He'd worked at Pelican Bay during the Von Dorch scandal and the Gladiator Fights lawsuits. He had thought ADX was immune to that kind of chaos. Now, staring at his screens, he wasn't so sure. Claire left the booth and walked the tier. Each door she passed hid a man whose name was known from headlines: bombers, spies, cartel lieutenants. Most were silent. But when she reached the end of the corridor, she saw a pattern scratched into the paint near a vent. the same cipher she'd seen in Pelican Bay photos. She snapped a picture with her phone. At that moment, a technician burst from the control room. "We've got a breach," he said. "Fiber optic line down in maintenance." Claire's mind jumped to the hunger strikes again. Inmates communicating not through technology, but through timing, legal mail, even plumbing knocks. If someone had replicated that across 2 Supermaxes, they could be moving information faster than any guard rotation. She followed Harris down a service stairwell to sublevel C. The air was colder here, with a chemical tang of bleach and metal. They reached a sealed panel covering the fiber trunk. Someone had removed the screws. Harris touched the edge, felt fresh dust on his fingers. "We just replaced this last month," he muttered. "No one should have—" Back in H Unit, Salinas lay on his concrete bed staring at the ceiling. He had made no overt move, broken no rule. Yet thousands of people on the outside were about to read documents they'd never seen before. As the camera zoomed in, he mouthed one last phrase, inaudible but clear. "Every fortress has a fault line." Cliffhanger. Claire's phone buzzed with a new encrypted message. It contained a link to a public site. She opened it. Hundreds of pages of sealed depositions about ADX and Pelican Bay filled the screen. A headline blinked at the top: "Inside America's worst maximum security prisons, exposed." She looked up from the glow of her phone, realizing the story had already escaped the walls. The leak hit before sunrise. By the time Claire Monroe reached her hotel room in Denver, her phone was vibrating nonstop with alerts. Major newspapers, human rights groups, and TV networks were already posting excerpts from sealed depositions, inspection photos, and internal memos about both ADX Florence and Pelican Bay. The files weren't sensational fabrications. They were the same documents lawyers and journalists had been fighting to see for years. Use of force reports, mental health evaluations, hunger strike grievances, photographs of isolation cells, even details of the Von Dortch scalding case. On the morning news, anchors said what Claire had been warning for months. A massive leak has exposed the hidden realities of America's most secure prisons. The footage cut between ADX's gray walls in the Colorado desert and aerial shots of Pelican Bay's SU on California's foggy coast. Graphics flashed with phrases once confined to legal filings: indefinite solitary, mental health crisis, Madrid v. Gomez, Ashker v. Governor of California. For the first time, millions of people were seeing what Supermax really meant. Inside ADX, Rafael Salinas sat calmly in his cell. A week later, Congress announced a bipartisan hearing on solitary confinement and Supermax conditions. Families of ADX and Pelican Bay inmates were invited to testify. Former guards who had witnessed gladiator fights at Pelican Bay and mental health crises at ADX agreed to speak on record. The words systemic reform appeared in headlines alongside maximum security. Claire sat in the back of the packed hearing room, watching senators hold up blown-up images of cells, grievance forms, and leaked memos. She felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that the truth was finally public. Dread because she didn't know who had engineered it or what they might do next. Across the country, in a small mailroom in California, a staffer sorted through incoming envelopes. One bore the return address of a law office representing inmates in several states. Inside was a folded blueprint of another prison, not ADX, not Pelican Bay, with a single sentence at the bottom. Phase 2 starts here. Claire's phone buzzed again with a notification from a news app. Exclusive. New document suggests Supermax leak spreading. She closed her eyes, the weight of the past months pressing down. Whoever was behind the leaks had turned America's worst maximum security prisons into an ongoing expose, one facility at a time. She thought about the camera lens in Salinas' cell, the way he had mouthed, "Every fortress has a fault line." She opened a new document on her laptop and began typing her own report, starting with one sentence: "The walls are cracking." If you thought this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe now, because the darkest secrets are still hidden in plain sight.